off the road through the gravel. There you see ploughing off the racetrack, going one of those from that leading gaggle. We joined a little late due to the race starting while GT podiums had been going on, and Caroline Everett, who was third across the line, was the driver that ended up through the gravel. Now, in traditional Caterham style, we've had lots and lots of shuffling right from the get-go. David Yates has had a go in the lead, but right now it is Luke Rosewell with 17 minutes and change still on the clock, and Luke Rosewell leading from Jeff Newman in second place, and he's doing his absolute level best to get away then as the cars accelerate their way now up towards Hawthorns once more. It's the second race of the weekend for these cars. They had one earlier on in the day which went the way of Gary Smith, who came here as well as the championship leader. Well, he currently is in sixth place, so Gary Smith with work to do, but he timed it absolutely to perfection in the first race, and you can anticipate more of the same in this as Luke Rosewell comes under attack from Jeff Newman, who took his turn in the lead of the first race and then dropped back a little bit and couldn't really respond fully, so he ended up fourth in race one. Let's see what he can do in this second race then as we nudge towards the halfway point. The cars thread their way out of Sheen Curve up towards Stirling's. And they're going through, you can see, is 99, that car which has clawed its way up from, if you like, the second row of the grid, Cameron Cooper at the wheel of it, but falling back a little bit. Now it's trying to reassert itself, because from third on the grid it's fallen to 11th, but the pace is good and it should be able to move up again. Now for the race lead, they're side by side. To the outside line is Jeff Newman, to the inside line Luke Rosewell. They dive into Paddock Hill Bend, and a new race leader. It is Jeff Newman then who goes through. He started 7th on the grid, and now it is, if you like, his turn to lead the pack as they climb the hill. But Luke Rosewell thinks differently. He started on the 5th row, a row behind him, and they're absolutely side by side, wheel to wheel around Druids here. Down they come into Graham Hill Bend. So onto Cooper Straight go the race leaders. In third, the blue and white car is David Yates, who from the outside of the front row of the grid did lead. It was a rolling start for this race. There back into the lead goes Luke Rosewell, through on the inside line, picks up the place. One driver sadly not in this, John Styring, whose car picked up damage on the way to the first corner. He was given a bit of a whack by Rob Warner, who got a grid drop for this race by way of penalty, but the damage enough to put John Styring out for the day. Jeff Newman leads. Luke Rosewell is second then as they turn their way through, with now Gary Smith up into third place. And this a replay of the start, so we can piece together exactly who did what off the line. Pole position, Jason McCormack for Macmillan Motorsport. And I think, right in saying, was missing from that grid as the cars dived into paddock, so gave David Yates, if you like, a free ride up towards the first corner, and the field turning their way then now up into Druids on that opening lap of the race. David Yates ahead at that point. So down towards Hawthorns they ran. David Yates then still very much part of that leading group. Caroline Everett in the mix at that point as well in third place, but as we'd seen just as we joined the race, she went wide at Paddock Hill Bend and fell through the pack. All of these cars, 1600cc engines, but they're a mix of the 310s, the 270s and the old Supersport cars. But it was Jeff Newman that asserted himself into the lead of the race and tried to build on that as the cars came pouring over the line early doors. Right now, though, it is Jeff Newman versus Gary Smith. There, the recovering David Yates, a little bit further back in the pack. And 14 minutes of the race remain as the cars now go into the left of Surtees, back onto the Grand Prix section of the circuit. That black car in second place, Gary Smith. Now, he has already taken victories this year at Donaldson, and he won here as well. He came as the championship leader, and rather underlining why. He goes to the outside line here against Newman. He should be able to make this work, in fact, round the outside line. Yes, he does, and he makes it look easy, doesn't he? Really brave stuff, but it pays out for him. So Gary Smith goes through. Jeff Newman drops into second place, and right on his tail, Luke Rosewell. The red car in the mix as well there is that of Stuart Bell, who was delayed and picked up damage in the first race, but he could well be a factor as this wears on as well now, because he's there in fourth spot, very much part of that leading gaggle. So Gary Smith, the man from Cheltenham, leads the way. Out of Stirling's they will turn. More tyres squeal. Those tyres, naturally, in a Toyo Tyres back series, are Toyo tyres. And they've been given a real work over here, proving how durable they are. Down through Clark Curve they turn, up towards the timing line. And to the end of this 7th lap, I can hear gravel rattling. Yeah, somebody's gone way out wide at Clark Curve through the gravel bed. It's towards the bottom end of the top 10. But the car in question is about to dig itself back onto the circuit. We'll come to that in a moment as the field pours through. The one that we have lost, I fear, might be Caroline Everett again. We saw her off at paddock and has just gone through. Yes, so Caroline Everett's had a second drama there. She is rejoining through all the gravel and the dust. Damage on the left-hand side, and this is becoming a rather checkered race, but back on track now. So 4 for the lead. Gary Smith it is up front, but only just as the cars now sprint once again along Cooper Straight. The run now towards Surtees. Onto the Grand Prix section of the circuit they go. In second place, the car with the red cage is that of Luke Rosewell. And then in third spot, you can see, is Jeff Newman. And Jeff Newman now gets a tow as the cars blast down towards Hawthorns. They're heading into that right-hander. He's not only got a tow, he also looked at the inside line, but then thinks better of it. Slots back in as the cars now go through the corner. Stuart Bell in fourth place, very much part of this battle as well. He goes to the inside for third against Newman and almost thinks about second against Rosewell, but he certainly gains one place. That was brave stuff. Turn through the corner then, up towards Sheen Curve they go this time. Towards Stirling's comes the fight for race leadership, and that line is starting to build again, because also now coming into the mix, you've got a little bit further back Mark Roberts, number 33, who didn't really have a great first race, but he's shining well in this second race of the day as the cars now come down through Clark Curve. Up towards the timing line this time they will turn with Smith comfortably ahead, in Caterham terms, by about 4 lengths. But that leading line is what, 6 cars now, which means it's Smith, Rosewell, Newman, Bell, there's Yates involved in that, and also Michael O'Reilly, who led probably more laps than anybody in the earlier race, but then fell away towards the end, and it wasn't really reflective, the result, of his pace during the race itself. Andrew Donaldson, who is currently 8th, number 93, is also a man to watch, because a little bit like what we saw in the earlier race, he's sort of taking his time about this. He set the fastest lap of race 1 pretty early, but only became a factor right at the very end. Got second place on the last lap and then lost it again. Finished third on that notional podium. But here, again, he's chipping his way forward and showing good pace and getting up with that leading group. The red car of Stuart Bell delayed on the opening lap of the first race, showing much, much better pace in this second encounter of the day. And as the cars then now make the run once again down towards Hawthorns, Luke Rosewell in the third place car, perhaps coming under attack. But the other man to watch, as I say, number 33, Mark Roberts, he is 11th on the grid because he was 11th in that first race. You do a reversal of the top 10. So he's the first driver, if you like, that missed any benefit of the reverse grid. But there he is running 5th, showing much, much better speed than ever he did in the earlier race. Into Stirling's they come then, turn through that left-hander. Big squeal of tyres, but you kind of get used to that in Caterham racing. And that leading line continues to grow with now 10 minutes on the clock. Now, if earlier races this weekend are anything to go by, there is a pattern that round about this time, things start to become just a little bit more urgent. And when you get to 5 minutes, they're even more urgent again. The drivers have a countdown display in their cars, or many of them do, so they'll know how much time there is left in the race and they'll be able to gauge when to push against that. Gary Smith, the race leader, looking for 2 out of 2 here at Brands Hatch this weekend, but he's not getting away, is he? If anything, he's being caught once again here. They all concertina up behind him again as they turn their way up through Druids. Onto Cooper Straight. Gary Smith, who had 1 win at Donington, Don Henshaw, absent this weekend, won the other, but right now, the earlier race winner from Brands Hatch getting away, building the lead, because behind him, Rosewell, then Stuart Bell, and also who we got up into 4th place now, Jeff Newman, are all busy squabbling. They're up into 5th place, still Mark Roberts, charging. In 6th place, Michael O'Reilly. And Gary Smith hoping to make, if you like, hay while the sun is shining here by building that gap while they're all squabbling behind him. And that is exactly what you need to do in a Caterham race. Try and get away so the toe is broken. Who's that going? Rally crossing 56, potentially. Way wide out of Graham Hill Bend, Paul Wells. Regular Caterham racer both in this series and also an occasional racer in the Magnificent 7 series that the Classic Sports Car Club runs. But that rally crossing would have done him no favours whatsoever. The leaders then come out of Stirling's up towards the completion of lap number 10. The earlier race was 15 in total. That's the target. 8 more minutes are on the clock here. Through they turn and up towards the line. It remains Gary Smith in the lead, but only last time by 3/10. It's not going to be much more, I don't think, this time, because Luke Rosewell there tries to get a toe. He's back up into second place. Yeah, it's still 0.3 of a second, so they're trading hundreds, really, more than anything else here. Make the climb up towards Druids. Into the braking zone goes Luke Rosewell there. Tries to find a way around Gary Smith. He's managed to hunt him down enough to be right back on his tail and try and benefit from the slipstream effect as they come now into Graham Hill Bend. You can see Gary Smith really working hard behind the wheel as they sprint along Cooper Straight this time. Down to Surtees, go left. Nose to tail for the race lead. Now over the brow, down towards Hawthorns. There in third place is Stuart Bell, doing his absolute best to stay with the top two, hoping he can benefit from their double toe because they're side by side. They could barely be closer, but it's still Smith on the inside with only 7 minutes to go who hangs on to the race lead. Out of Westfield they come, bounce over the curb. Up now towards Sheen Curve they go, and up towards Stirling's on this 11th lap of the race. Down they head towards Clearways. Now who's that running wide? Stuart Bell in the red car, kicks up the dust. Down towards Clearways then. And because he ran wide, so Jeff Newman is right on his tail, and so it costs Stuart Bell the chance of being part of that lead group, because now the top two, Smith and Rosewell, have just extended the advantage ever so slightly as they come across the timing line. Caroline Everett, by the way, after her couple of excursions down in 11th place, and Rob Warner, given a grid drop for this race, has battled his way up into 12th spot. So there, Smith goes wide, Rosewell dives up the inside. They very nearly made contact, so they might nearly make contact again at Druids, but Rosewell goes through. He had the inside line, he breaks as late as he dares, and that time around he got the job done. That was a good move, but it all started with Gary Smith running just a fraction too wide at paddock. Stuart Bell has shed a wheel arch. Look, and it's got caught round the front of Jeff Newman's car. So there, acting as an air brake, his pace is radically affected. That's one way of stopping the opposition, isn't it? Sort of Dick Dastardly move that, and Jeff Newman goes for the pit lane to try to get rid of that wheel arch, but that's massive frustration. It's not even his, and it's caught around his front wheel. Side by side for the race lead. Gary Smith back in front then. Luke Rosewell drops to second. Mark Roberts, I was talking about earlier, up from 11th. He's done the fastest lap of the race. Some of that is down to his own pace, some of it is down to a toe, but he's in fourth at the moment with the demise of Jeff Newman as the leaders go through Westfield, a hop and a skip and a squeal of the tyres as they do. Once more up the hill through Sheen Curve out of Dingledale. Stuart Bell riding the curbs, in other words, trying to shorten the lap, and it's working for him because he's nearly on the tail of Luke Rosewell now. Luke, who's a pretty experienced driver of all manner of things, because he spent time not only in these cars, but in Formula Ford 1600s, in Classic Sports Car Club events, in the Honda Civic Trophy as well. There, through number 13, that is Michael O'Reilly trying to fight back. He was the man that led many laps, if not more than anybody. He led most in the first race, but then fell away towards the end. And in this race, he's actually not quite making the progress he might have hoped up through the pack, as the leaders go through with 4 minutes and change on the clock. And once again, Luke Rosewell gets a good run out of paddock, makes his move up the inside now. Back marker ahead, ignore him. Who's leading? It's Rosewell up the curb on the inside, and he goes by. Good move, and it works. And he comes out ahead, except Gary Smith has other ideas about this. On the outside at Graham Hill Bend, can he get the undercut for the in? No, he cannot. So Luke Rosewell stays ahead, and now makes that run up towards the left-hander here. Look into Surtees. They negotiate that slower car of Andy Ebden, I think that was, the retired RAF engineer. Another experienced driver is Andy, but he gets out of the way of the top two. But now look, Stuart Bell is part of that group, and he goes second at the expense of Luke Rosewell. And into the last 3.5 minutes of the race, he's very much a factor for a race win now. So Stuart Bell goes second, and now makes his attack, does he, on Gary Smith? Well, he's a bit neater through Hawthorns, which means he's a bit closer coming up towards Westfield. He's got to attack and defend. The red car, Stuart Bell second. He's moved himself up there. So now, with possibly 2 more laps to run at the end of this, it is game on for the race lead. Gary Smith has managed to fend off the challenge of Luke Rosewell. Now he's got a new challenger, and that is Stuart Bell. There he is. Rosewell, though, is on his tail, and Luke's not given up either. They need to work together, otherwise Smith's going to drive away from them. Battling might be good to watch, might be good fun in the car, but it doesn't help at this late stage with only a couple of laps to go, and they'll know about the time looking at the display. heading up towards the line then. Nose to tail. Rosewell will get a toe here. He might be able to make a move up towards Paddock, but they can't keep playing like this because Gary Smith is getting away. Through they go. Last time around, the gap was 91 thousandths. Now it's 4/10, so it's certainly stretched. From Paddock, they turn up towards Druids. So Luke Rosewell, who a lap ago made his move for the race lead here, suddenly finds himself bumped back into third place. But they do close a little bit onto the back of the leader this time into Druids. Down through Graham Hill Bend. Lap 14. Race leader, Gary Smith. He's had, thus far, 2 wins out of 3 races. Is it going to be 3 from 4? It's looking good for him as he breaks for Surtees. There'll be 1 more lap to run at the end of this. Down towards Hawthorns for the penultimate time. Gary Smith led over the line by 0.4 of a second. Now, Michael O'Reilly, who has got himself up into 4th place, has now done an absolute best in the first sector, but he might not be 4th for much longer because Mark Roberts is right there with him. They were alongside one another coming down towards Hawthorns. Roberts pulls out, pulls back in again. But there is Michael O'Reilly who throws the car through Westfield. The leaders not quite side by side, but Stuart Bell again looking for a way up on the inside line there. Everything he tries, Gary Smith has an answer to it. Out of Sheen Curve, now down towards the left-hander of Sterling's they come. Luke Rosewell also can't be ruled out of this. O'Reilly is 4th, Roberts is 5th, and David Yates, who started on the front row of the grid, there comes into shot 6, having dropped a fair chunk of time, actually. Through on the inside, O'Reilly retakes his 4th place, fends off this challenge of Mark Roberts then. So Gary Smith has got 1 more lap to go. Stuart Bell in his wheel tracks, goes to the inside line, makes his move on the inside at Paddock, but Gary Smith is able to repel that as they turn through the corner there. Still can't really get up alongside, but maybe he doesn't want to try too early in the lap, except he doesn't want to leave the door open for Luke Rosewell, which is what happens, and Luke Rosewell goes through. That was a very, very bold move, but it paid off beautifully for him. Luke Rosewell seized the opportunity, dived through on the inside, and if you can't get past Gary Smith, he says to Stuart Bell, let me try. Nose to tail into Surtees. Luke Rosewell then jinking around behind Gary Smith, trying to unsettle him, but Rosewell went in a little bit too deep there, comes out slightly further behind than he would like to be, and so now the toe is afforded to Stuart Bell, who goes one side and then the other, and that I think has let Gary Smith escape enough and brings the 2nd place battle back as the centre of attention. Now they turn their way again up through Hawthorns. Towards Westfield they go for the final time, and Gary Smith possibly now has done enough, because this battle for 2nd place, delaying the 2 drivers involved just sufficiently to let him carry on building that lead. And Luke Rosewell in 2nd and Stuart Bell in 3rd are absolutely tied together, but still Gary Smith is looking oh so strong up front as he turns left now, brakes for Sterling's, goes through the corner. Makes that run down again towards the right-hander of Clark Curve. Through they turn, out of the right, onto the power, flag awaits. It's going to be a win for Gary Smith, but it's going to be a drag race to the line for 2nd place. Gary Smith will win for the 3rd time this season, and it's going to be a virtual dead heat for 2nd place, and Stuart Bell just goes back ahead on the line. He takes 2nd, Luke Rosewell 3rd. The margin between those 2 was 62 thousandths of a second as Michael O'Reilly is 4th. Then it is Mark Roberts for 5th, and David Yates takes 6th place. 7th goes the way of Marco Agam from the back row of the grid, having been in the gravel in the first race. So it was a good drive up through the field for Marco Agam. And the rest of the field heads towards the line. 8th, Andrew Donaldson, whose progress in that race was a bit disappointing compared to how well he went in the first. In 9th place, it is Cameron Cooper, who fell away early on, did recover a little bit, but again, not quite as energetically as hoped. And Caroline Everett finishing in 10th place as more battles come to the line here. The last handful of cars up towards the timing line, including Greg Hyatt, who goes through in 15th place. And there, number 63, which is Scott Parker. He comes home in 17th spot. So we've had, across the 2 divisions, 4 really good races from the Toyota 7-race series, and it's Gary Smith that wins once again here at Brands Hatch ahead of Stuart Bell. Luke Rosewell taking 3rd ahead of Michael O'Reilly, with Mark Roberts in 5th, David Yates 6th, with Marco Agam, Andrew Donaldson, Cameron Cooper and Caroline Everett rounding out the top 10. So good drive by Gary Smith, and a great shame that Jeff Newman had to retire with that bodywork, not his own, caught round the front of his car, but that's one of the perils, you could argue, of Caterham racing. Let's have a look at the highlights of that race that began with David Yates sprinting away from pole position, securing the race lead as they went into Paddock Hill Bend. And he was able to fend off the quick starting Caroline Everett, but also battling into contention Jeff Newman, fourth as he turned his way through Druids. David Yates being able at the early stage of the race to keep everybody at bay, but then as on that partially reversed grid, some of the successful drivers out of race one chipped their way forward, then so the order looked rather different. Off into the gravel went Andy Ebden, who was returned to the circuit, but many places down, as up front Gary Smith finally found a way into the lead, and Caroline Everett found the gravel at Clark Curve, having already been off the road once over at Paddock. Smith led the way then, Luke Rosewell second, and Stuart Bell battled his way up into third place as the cars turned their way up through Surtees onto the Grand Prix loop. There were battles still raging on all the way through the order as others explored all that Brands Hatch had to offer. Smith versus Rosewell for the race lead. The two cars absolutely together as they swung their way through that right-hander of Hawthorns, and then once again made that run down towards Paddock Hill Bend. More battles lower down the order, but for Caroline Everett, she was on target for a place in the top 10 despite a couple of excursions, and that leading group grew and grew mid-race, but eventually Gary Smith asserted himself and went through into the lead, and it would be a lead he was never to lose as Stuart Bell took second eventually from Luke Rosewell. It was a drag race to the line, and that red car of Stuart Bell just made the move to take second place. But Gary Smith does the double in the 1600 division. He takes 2 wins here at Brands Hatch this weekend.